So one of the things I want to talk to you guys about, though, I'm kind of on a little bit of a mission to go out and make sure everybody kind of understands this, because gain structure is such an important aspect of digital, and to try to help you kind of get things back together on your console and make sure it's actually operating in a very optimized way for you, okay? Because you can get out of whack really easily in digital, and it's not too forgiving. You know, in analog, it's a little more forgiving, but in digital, it is not. So I want to talk to you about how to set input gain, something as simple as setting input gain on a digital console. Because once you get that part right, the rest of it just becomes so easy. But we kind of have a tendency to just skip over this first step. And, you know, in analog, we can say, you know, there's probably a couple of different philosophies on how to set analog input gain. We can make cases for different ways to do it. I know this is going to rub you the wrong way, but I'm going to say it. There's one way to set input gain for a digital console. It's one way. Anything else, I can argue you right out of it. Okay? So let's talk about it. You okay with that? Yeah. Okay. So this has to do with, and I'll preface this part of it by saying, you know, live sound engineers have some really unique challenges. We have challenges that recording engineers don't have. We have challenges that post engineers don't have. And a lot of it revolves around getting our console optimized to both kind of tracking and mixing workflows. We got to do both those things at the same time, right? And a lot of it is built around fader position, okay? Here's the important part to remember. Faders are not linear, right? Meaning if the fader is sitting up in this area and I move it this distance, that represents 6 dB of change, right? If I go down in the scale, now notice the distance has decreased, but the amount of change has increased. And if I go down even farther, this very small change represents really big change, right? It's not linear, right? It's logarithmic, as a matter of fact. So the idea is that we want to be able to mix in high resolution. We want to have faders sitting up in this position. Now, I'm not here to say it has to sit at 0. For my money, if it sits +10, -10, you're in high resolution, okay? But down here, you got issues, you know, especially with the PA systems that are out there today. I mean, you can make small changes and hear small changes, okay? I mean, it's very analogous to mixing in a high-resolution studio. All right, so our goal is to get our console set up in a way where we can mix in high resolution, okay? You buying it so far? Okay. So let's talk about input gain concepts. This is where the arguments all start, all right? So we're going to build a very simple circuit here. We're going to have a preamp, and we're going to have a meter, all right? So here's where we start the question. Why do we have a preamp? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Why do we need a preamp? To amplify the signal? Why do we need to amplify the signal? Because the signal's low. Why is the signal low being a problem? Because I'm telling you right now, when you can answer this question, you're 99% of the way there. Yeah.
So you have a higher bit depth for the sound?
That's part of it. That's coming. But let's just stay in analog for a second. Why do I need a preamp? Well, that's true, but it's not the reason why. We need a preamp to be able to take a mic level signal to line level. Period. End of story. Now, let's just push away all the concepts of, well, some preamps sound better than others and all that. That doesn't deal with the why. The why we need a preamp is I need to get mic level signals to line level. Okay? Why do we need to do that?
So we can actually do something useful with the signal?
Yeah, well, that's true. But there's an actual, just flat out reason that we need to do it. Because all consoles are optimized underneath the hood to work at line level, not mic level. Okay? So where's line level? How do we know where line level is? Anybody? -15, 0? Which is it? You pick one.
-15 digital, 0.
That's true. Okay. So the answer to what he's getting to there is we have a meter to tell us. We have a meter to tell us where line level is. All right, so now that we know all of this, why is it so hard to set an input gain? Why is there so much consternation about it? Why is there so many approaches about it? It is simply taking a signal and moving it from mic level to line level so that it works properly and transports through the console properly. Right? That's all you need to care about. All right, now signal to noise, all of that stuff, that comes into play in analog for sure. We can get enough signal in where we have circuit noise that is diminished with regard to it, et cetera. But I promise you that even in analog circuitry, line level is the place where that is the best. In digital, because we're converting, that doesn't come into play. There is no signal noise. At some point, we just have bit depth that is so poor that the signal turns into noise. Okay? So let's get back to our original discussion here. So we have our mic level signal coming in. We need to get it to line level because the console is built to work at line level. In our situation, that has to do with 0 dB. Okay? Not dBFS, this is dBVU. Okay? 0 dB. All right? So let's talk about this for a minute. What do all these different scales mean? All right? So what it means is I take a mic level signal in and I turn up the preamp until it is sitting at 0 line level. All right, I want it operating somewhere around 0. What does that actually mean in terms of the electronics part of it? What that means is if I took a direct output from that channel and went out of the console with it, it would be plus 4 dBu analog. All right. In venue land, it's called dBr, meaning we have an analog scale, right? And 0 dB there actually represents minus 20 dBFS because it's digital, right? But we've given you it at an analog scale. But here's the important part to remember. When that console or that signal is operating around 0, the analog portion of a console would put out plus 4 dBu. Venue would put out plus 4 dBu. And Pro Tools would put out plus 4 dBu if that signal is sitting at those levels. Okay? All right, so 0 is, it's the same. It's just different ways of showing the same signal. Okay? Everybody with me? Okay? Just different ways to look at the same thing. All right, so let's go back to here we go. So, here's the other piece of it that we have to pay attention to in digital, right? In analog, it's noise, right? That's the enemy in noise, or in analog is noise. Right, if we didn't have enough, if that mic level signal was too low, actual signal noise would compete with it, right? That's not the case in digital. What we have in digital is a bit depth issue, right? Meaning how many bits are being used on the signal. And here's where we're gonna run into probably some conflict with recording engineers, et cetera, but I'm gonna try to explain the difference between these two things in live and recording. In our world, we work in 24-bit depth preamps, right? 24-bit. What that translates to over the scale is 6 dB per bit, okay? So if I have the signal operating at minus 6, I've used 23 bits of conversion, right? Minus 12, 22 bits, right on down the line, right? So you just keep subtracting. So what that means is if I can get a signal RMS-wise hanging at 0 line level, I'm actually converting at around 21 bit. That's plenty. That's plenty of bit resolution, especially for live sound. All right. Now, here's the other thing to take into account here. If my main signal is sitting here and it's converting at 21 bit, in a live sound signal, let's say it's a vocal mic, right? And we have vocal signal. What's all the signal that's sitting down here? If this is the vocal, what's down here? Yeah, room, background noise, amplifiers, drums, etc. Well, what do you think those signals are converting at? Yeah, very low bit rate, right? They're not going to be very pretty. That's why it's very important in digital, even though it's nearly impossible, as you're going to hear on some of the tracks I'm going to play you today, to keep that signal low and out of the way. And the worst part about it is if we don't get that signal coming in properly to line level, if we run it too low, then not only do we get low bit resolution of the main signal, but even worse resolution of the background noise. Right? So it's uber important to get your levels right on the console. Yeah.
How do you then answer, because I get this regularly from different people, the idea of taking a 16-bit workflow of recording so that you're just short of 0 dBFS to maximize resolution.
Yeah. You have to just be careful with it. In this, and here's the difference between like the studio mentality and the live sound mentality. In the studio mentality, let's go back to that situation again where I was just talking about. Let's say we're recording a vocal, right? What's all this stuff sitting down here in a recording? Yeah, that's your $1 million room, right? So we don't want that to be recorded low bit rate as well. We want to get all of it recorded hotter. Now, obviously, there's some place where we can't get more level. You know, this ratio is not going to change unless we change it, meaning I compress the signal or limit the signal pre-conversion, right? So if I reduce that pre-conversion and then turn the whole thing up, I now have a much higher bit rate conversion of my background noise, my room, right? So that's the recording mentality. The problem is, when we do that in live sound, first of all, we don't have the ability, unless we really put together some specialized signal paths, we don't have the ability to compress or limit pre-conversion. Okay, so that's the first thing. If we do it post-conversion, we're not gaining anything in bit depth, and we're actually taking all of this not so well recorded background noise and moving it closer to our signal. What is this in there? This is echo, this is PA system, this is cymbals, this is, you know, that's where all of these heavy compression techniques for live microphones don't serve you very well in live sound. Okay? You got to be much more judicious with it. Okay? We don't have that luxury of isolation that we have in the studio. Okay? You with me so far? Okay. So let's get back to it here. So the idea here, again, is just to get maximized operating system here. Now, why is this more important in live sound, or why is this really important in live sound? Because it plays directly into fader levels as well. And not only that, as you're going to see here in a second, it's also what? Our record level. It's our record level as well. Directly off the pre and the conversion is also our recording level. So here's the challenge that we have in live sound. This is it in a nutshell. Let's make this the bass drum for a second, okay? If I'm sitting at the console and I gain up that bass drum and get it optimized right around line level, and it's not loud enough in the room, what's that telling me? We need a bigger PA system. We need a bigger PA system, right? There's nothing I'm going to be able to do between here and there to magically make that work. There are no plugins to magically make it work and give me more headroom, etc. When you turn it on and there's not enough of it, there's not enough PA. Okay? Now compare that to the studio. Do we ever say there's not enough control room monitors? No. This is a dynamic that we have to tend with in live sound, right? Now, here's the other problem that we have to tend with that is, again, not in recording. What do we do? Let's say it's well, we started out with the bass drum. Let's stick on the bass drum for a second. Let's say I turn up the bass drum in the PA. I've got my fader set at 0, high resolution, and of course I've got my master setting at 0, but it's now way too loud for the music I'm going to be presenting. This is the bigger dilemma. Now what do? Where do I turn it down? Well, so now if I turn it down at the amps, I'm going to penalize the level of all inputs, the potential of all inputs, just because the bass drum was too loud. Where do I turn it down? How do I make it right for the music I'm about to present? What kind of subgroup? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right on the money there. We have an excellent student in the audience today. Thank you for coming. So let's play the game, though. I'll back up, even though you're exactly right. Let's play the game, because what I see people do more often than not is one of two things. More often than not, they will turn this down. They say, well, just turn down the preamp. What's the ramification of that? Lower bit rate, lower resolution, right? Okay? So in analog, you can kind of get away with that at times, but in digital, you really can't get away with it, right? So we've got to come up with a way to turn this down. The other part of it that we don't want to do for live, remember, we're adjusting this to make it right in the room. Well, we've now also destroyed the record level. Now it's not recording at the right level either. Now the guys are going to get it in post, go, dude, what's up with your levels? Well, it had to be right for the room, right? So the other piece of it, like I said, is the digital recorder is tapped right off of that. The other thing is, once it's optimized here, it's perfectly set up for effects processing on the channel, meaning gates, compressors, etc. When this is optimized for 0, you can literally go to the gate and punch it in without doing anything on the settings. If the threshold is set right at 0, and the gate will probably start operating correctly, right? If you don't have that, if I turn down that kick drum there to make it work in the room, let's say I turn it down 20 dB, maybe that's what it's got to be for the room. Now I've got to find an additional 20 dB of threshold in my noise gate to make it work. There's all this calculation that's got to take place in my head now to kind of go, well, it's down 20. You might even be able to get enough threshold to get it to work, right? Again, line level is where the console is optimized to work, right? So the other place it comes into play is if I turn it down, I've stolen gain potential from aux levels. If I'm mixing monitors there, now I've taken away gain from the aux level just to get it to sit right in the room. Okay? And here's the bummer about it. This is probably the thing I see people do the most. They just apply a VCA subgroup to this, right? Think, well, I'll just use a VCA to do it. And we know what a VCA does, right? As it moves down, oops, I think I got ahead of myself there. As it moves down, it is essentially moving the fader down, right? Now, that can work to our advantage, don't get me wrong, but in this situation, to use it to create an offset or to use it to set the level in the room, honestly, it's the wrong choice because you've now stolen that same amount of gain away from that aux bus. You don't really have it optimized in the aux bus now, right? So if you had something sitting outside here, maybe it's not monitor mix in this situation, maybe it's an effects processor or a compressor, maybe it's bus-driven compression. Now you're in the same problem, right? You've stolen a gain away from there, and you're going to have to make it up in threshold out there. All of a sudden, the tail starts chasing the dog a little bit, you know? Whereas if we make this an audio subgroup, and I'm going to give you a piece of language here to help you kind of understand this a little better, because subgroup is really not the best term to use in this situation. It really should be submaster, right? It's a submaster, meaning if this is the submaster for my drums, this is going to represent the overall level of the drums in the room. It's a master fader for the drum kit. I may create a master fader for the guitars, a master fader for the keyboards, etc., right? It's not a VCA, it's an audio subgroup, all right? So I can leave this where it's supposed to be, optimized here. I still have a good record level. I have optimized signal for dynamics processing. I still have the full gain potential for any aux buses, pre or post fader, because I've used an audio subgroup there to set the right level, not a VCA, which would steal gain potential away post fader, right? And the other thing, keep in mind, if you're doing bus-style compression, if you've got compression being driven off of an aux bus and you have this set up as a VCA, every time you move the VCA, you've now changed the threshold to the compressor. You're going to be chasing your tail for a long time to get that right. Okay? Is this making sense to everybody? Right. So how do we set gain? RMS level to line level on the console.